Good evening. It is Monday, November 9th. This is the Guilford Board of Education meeting. Welcome to all who are joining us. The first thing is the Pledge of Allegiance, so I invite you to join us in the pledge. I pledge allegiance
to the flag
of the United
States of America
and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice
for all.
All right. First on the agenda is the October 13th, 2020 Board of Ed minutes. Do I have a motion to approve those minutes? Mrs. Sullivan, a second? Dr. Best, thank you. Any comments or corrections on the October 13th minutes? I had two very minor things. Page 3 under 8.2, the curriculum was approved or adopted by the Board of Ed on September 12th. I just wanted to correct that. And then under 8.3, this is really just to make a clarification. 3 lines up in that first paragraph, after conferring with the state, local public health authorities, I think it's important to make sure that public health is in there because in fact, they are very much a part of decisions around what model we're in at any given time with schools. Any other comments from Board of Ed members? All right, so we have a motion and a second to approve with those amendments. All in favor? Aye. Anybody object? Abstentions? All right, so we will approve those minutes. Next, the October 26th workshop meeting minutes. Is there a motion to approve? Dr. Best, second. Mrs. Rader, any corrections or comments on these?
Yes.
Sorry, go ahead, Ted.
On page 2, under number 4, COVID update, it says, Dr. Freeman, that we are now fully open K-6. I think it should read, Dr. Freeman indicated that we are now open 4 days a week, K-6.
Okay.
And in the third paragraph there, at the last sentence in that paragraph, I don't understand what we're trying to convey.
There will be a tipping point. Is that what you're talking about?
Yeah. Where
I think the word should be whole school. There will be a tipping point where a whole school will be distance learning due to staff shortages. I think the word while needs to be changed to whole.
That sounds accurate, yes.
Okay. That's
those are helpful. Those are helpful changes.
Anything else? All right, we have a first and second. All in favor of approving these minutes? Aye. Any objections? Abstain? No. All right. Okay. In lieu of public forum, we continue to invite the public to reach out to us via email. I will say we are going to look into try to find a way to perhaps accommodate a possibility of a public comment during one of our meetings. I know it's a kind of a challenging way to communicate. We are trying to respond to all emails. Please feel free to reach out with any questions, concerns. We've also gotten a few thank yous. We don't mind those either. So appreciate all communications. Any board member, Dr. Freeman. Next up, review of expenditures, Mrs. Peck.
Okay, we did cover that quite extensively in our operations committee meeting earlier. To highlight a few noteworthy items, we are a little higher this month than we were October of last year, primarily attributed to certain bills that have come in October this year that probably fell into September last year. So overall, our percentage is nearly the same. So despite the fact that we look a little high this month, really, as far as we're concerned, at this point in the year, we're doing okay. Noteworthy items, we are high in legal expenses. Because of COVID, we've had a number of additional legal fees that we have accrued due to short-term contract negotiations, MOUs for reopening the schools. So we've had additional legal expenses. And then certainly noteworthy, due to COVID, we have had about $1 million worth of additional expenses from July until now, about half of which we will be receiving some grant money to cover about half of that amount. But we're not done. Unfortunately, that $1 million is just getting us started with what we're going to need to spend to try to keep everybody in school and to keep the kids distanced and have the appropriate PPE equipment that we need to keep our schools operating under the health department's advisement. Other than those major factors, is there anything else that anyone else wants to bring up from the finances that we talked about earlier tonight? Okay. Anything else you'd like me to touch on, Katie?
Just so we have for the record what the expenses were this month.
Sure. Okay. So our overall expenses this month were $5,208,209. And that's as compared with about 4.4 million in October last year. Revenue for October was 9,434, primarily from Medicaid and pre-K tuition. And then,
oh, go ahead.
Go ahead. No, I was just going to touch on COVID numbers, but.
Go ahead. No, go right ahead.
Okay. So COVID, we were at about $1 million so far, and we have received 2 grants. We have not received the monies from these grants, but we've received approval for these grants. One is the Elementary and Secondary Schools Emergency Relief Grant for $117,000, and the Coronavirus Relief Funds Grant for $473,000. So those 2 combined will take a good chunk out of our $1 million expenditure so far. But again, this is going to be an ongoing expense that we did not budget for, that we're going to need to be aware of as we proceed forward this year.
Absolutely. Thank you. And as you noted, we talked extensively about this in the operations committee, but giving an opportunity for anyone who might have a last question. No. All right. So Mrs. Peck, is that a motion to approve the finances for October?
I'd like to make a motion to approve those. Yes, thank you.
All right. Is there a second? Mr. Galino. All right. Wonderful. All in favor? Aye. Any opposed? Any abstentions? No. All right. So that's approval of the expenditures. Item number 6, communications. I will note, I think in the last couple of weeks, received a couple of communications just asking some clarification around the curriculum. We had a wonderful presentation by 2 of our faculty at our last meeting, really going through the social studies curriculum and approaches. It was really terrific, and I encourage anyone who has not yet had a chance to see that. That is definitely on YouTube. And then also received a communication today related to some of our agenda items, asking some questions about the calendar. This particular person requesting consideration of a start after Labor Day and a consideration of using snow days as remote learning days. And then also around our budget topic and interest in full-time art instruction at the elementary schools. Did anybody else receive communications they want to make sure to mention? All right, student representatives.
So Julia wasn't able to make it today, so I'll be covering her schools as well.
All right, wonderful. Great
Thank
to
you,
see
Jerry.
you.
Yep.
Go right ahead.
So first of all, at A.W. Cox, they celebrated a Spirit Week from the 26th of October to the 30th, and it culminated in a Wear Orange and Black Spirit Day. And next, second grade classes also walked to the community garden recently to learn about the garden and to plant garlic. And like many spring flowering bulbs, garlic is planted in the fall. So the students will return to the community garden in the spring to measure the growth of these plants. Students and teachers are continuing to find creative ways to safely engage in classroom math activities, which includes using individual manipulative kits for measurement and modeling area. So it's much more hands-on. And during the month of November, the A.W. Cox School community is also focusing on gratitude as part of their continued involvement with the Choose Love movement. So students and staff are noting that the many things that they are grateful for. Students plan to write letters to members of the armed forces as well to thank them for their service. Next, at Guilford Lake School, parent volunteers have painted the blacktop of the playground to include fun, creative activities for the students at recess. And they also had Spirit Week the last week of October, where kids were very much enjoying dressing up and also creating a sense of community with their peers. And Skills Block is going very well too. The teachers are learning the program and students are engaged and enjoying the learning. And lastly, they started a Thanksgiving drive, which is collecting grocery store gift cards to support the Guilford Social Services food drives. At Calvin Leet School, the teachers and students are also continuing to adjust and engage in academic learning opportunities. In their most recent PTO meeting, they had Dr. Freeman as an invited special guest, and teachers shared classroom updates with the families. They would also like to congratulate Mrs. Guarino's kindergarten class for winning the PTO membership drive contest, where 90% of families in room 18 have signed up with the PTO. In honor of veterans, students brought in pictures of their family members that served. They are creating a beautiful collage in honor of those veterans, which will be mounted on a wall in their school. And National Kind Day is approaching November 13th, where Leet teachers and staff will sport Be Kind shirts and students will wear their cougar gears. And in their Choose Love lessons, they emphasize and model the importance in understanding the compassion for others is what binds us all together. At Melissa Jones, on October 19th, they welcome cohort A and B students to 4 days a week of in-person learning. And that day included the traditional Melissa Jones crowning ceremony, during which the new students and staff were welcomed with a student-made paper crown. And although this year's celebrations were held outside by grade level rather than together with the whole school, it was still a heartwarming event that helped to strengthen the bonds. And Jones also celebrated the arrival of the fall with Black and Orange Day on Friday, October 30th. Students and staff were invited to wear black and orange to school in order to bring some extra fun and extra school spirit. And finally, parent-teacher conferences are being held today and tomorrow, and it has been great for them to see staff and families coming together to support the students. And next at the middle schools at Baldwin, on election day, the teaching staff participated in professional learning activities, which focused on examining their grading practices and discussions around the habits of success that is valuable in learning. And they are also working to improve the feedback and reporting that is provided to families so that it is more individualized and meaningful. And in addition to this, they are examining how to better meet the social and emotional needs of the students during this challenging time. In early October, Baldwin Middle School also received a 3-dimensional display from the National Archives titled Rightfully Hers. And this highlights the fight for voting rights for women. Students and teachers are able to visit this display and explore the resources made available through the National Archives. And many thanks to Kevin Brown for facilitating this opportunity. On Veterans Day and in the days following, students and teachers will have the opportunity to explore a variety of resources that explore the history and purpose of Veterans Day through a Bitmoji classroom activity. Students will be honoring veterans who are family members or friends by creating an electronic dog tag honoring each veteran, and they will put these together in a virtual wall of honor that will be shared with a school community just before Thanksgiving. The Baldwin community will also be participating in a service project to support the veterans by collecting face masks, hand sanitizers, and socks. And in the coming weeks, these items will be delivered to organizations that support the veterans. And special thanks to Mrs. Deere, Mrs. McLaughlin, and Mrs. Chapman for their work on Veterans Day plans. And at Baldwin, parent-teacher conferences are being held on Monday, November 16th and Tuesday, the 17th. And the conferences at Baldwin will be virtual. At Adams Middle School, 8th grader Addison Smith is conducting a sneaker drive to raise money for the Dan Cosgrove Animal Shelter. And there are 3 spots in town where folks can bring the sneakers. One is at the Parks and Rec Center, one is at the Department of Social Services next to Adams, and Adams can bring them right to school. And the sneaker drive will last the month of November. Addie has already raised over $3,000 for the shelter. Adams Peer Helpers are also sponsoring a walkathon fundraiser for Chloe Mason Mann. She is a 7th grader who is undergoing treatment for leukemia, and students will walk during the week of November 15th to 21st. Student clubs and activities begin this month, and all student clubs are operating virtually. And students participate in a survey to share their experiences with the faculty regarding hybrid learning, including like what is going well, what does the school need to look at to improve this experience, and other aspects as well. And finally, at the high school, we've had a pretty successful week as the sports have come to an end. The boys cross country are division champions for overall conference title, and they came in 2nd place to Xavier. The girls cross country team are division champions and SEC conference champions again. We've also had a bit of a spirit day. We had crazy sock day for some extra Halloween fun. And early decision deadlines for senior college applications are approaching, which is this November 1st, or which was November 1st. And clubs and activities are also starting to meet up again. And the meetings are also being held virtually over Zoom. Thank you.
I'm on mute. Jerry, that was wonderful. Thank you.
Thanks.
So it was great to hear what's happening with Veterans Day, because of course I was on the board many years ago. Dr. Freeman will probably remember the exact date when we as a board voted to start holding school on Veterans Day so that we could really celebrate and learn from our veterans. And it's great to hear what schools are doing this year to make sure that that continues, even though we could not bring people in the way we have the last several years. Other comments or questions for Jerry? Jerry, thank you so much. It's always great to hear all that's happening. Appreciate you taking on all 7 schools this evening, for sure. And as always, you're welcome to stay, but we completely understand that you may have homework or other things you need to do.
Thanks, Jerry.
Thank you.
All right, we are now up to the superintendent's report. So Dr. Freeman, I'm going to turn it over to you.
Thank you, Dr. Balistraci. I want to start by noting that about a week ago, a little more than a week ago now, we sent out notification that we would be continuing at least for another few weeks in the condition in which we find ourselves currently, that we are fully open 4 days a week in grades K through 6, but that we remain in the hybrid model in grades 7 through 12. I do want to note that since that time, we have continued to see numbers in Connecticut and around Guilford continue to trend in the wrong direction. Today, we reached a positivity rate of 3.7 in the state. we have seen both hospitalizations and new case counts increase across the state. So at this time, regrettably, we are not considering continuing to make the move to more fully open at either Adams or at the high school. The good news in that is that in Guilford locally, numbers continue to trend better than they do statewide. And in the schools specifically, while we are continuing to see positive cases come into the school, and while we are seeing numbers of students who are required to quarantine, in fact, students and staff members who are required to quarantine, to date, we have not identified through contact tracing a transfer or an infection that has happened within our schools. So again, I want to say that really clearly. We're certainly dealing with students and with staff members who are being identified as positive for COVID-19. But in every case, as we respond to those, first, it appears that those students and staff members have not been infected in the schools. And then when we respond, we have not identified a single instance where that positive case has transferred to another student or another staff member within the school. To me, what that means is that our protocols are in fact working. So while we are fully open, grades K through 6, we're still strictly cohorting, we're limiting access to school buses, students aren't moving in the ways that we've been moving before, and most importantly, we are strictly following our guidelines of wearing masks and taking limited and controlled mask breaks. We're not bringing students together in large congregate areas like lunches in the cafeteria. At Adams and at the high school, while we have the mask mandate in place and while we continue to stay in the hybrid model, it creates smaller class sizes, and therefore those protocols seem to be working as well. I again just want to note for the community, we absolutely understand the impact that this has on our students. We would prefer to have our students in school, but it does appear that those protocols are working. I also need to again mention, however, that we are seeing the numbers of quarantine requirements increasing in all of our schools. We're continuing to be impacted by more and more students who are availing themselves of the distance learning while they complete a quarantine. And we're beginning to be concerned about the numbers of staff members that are being impacted. Earlier today, I looked at some numbers that noted 6 different school districts around the state have been required to close schools, at least temporarily, or transition to full distance learning, at least temporarily, because of the impact that these spreading quarantines are having on the ability to fully staff a building. We are struggling with substitute shortages, like schools across the state are struggling with substitute shortages. At this time, while we have quarantined small numbers of individually identified students, while we have quarantined some individual classes, we have yet to reach a point of an entire school closure or obviously a district closure as a result of those quarantine numbers, but we continue to monitor that closely. I just want to acknowledge our staff members that in these cases, when teachers have been required to quarantine, they have in almost every case, those teachers have continued instructing their students from the quarantine from home. When classes have quarantined with their teachers, they've shifted to a full distance learning model, and those teachers have continued to support their students even from their own quarantine. I just want to really appreciate the efforts that are taking place on the part of our administration and teachers to try to keep this system open and supporting students in a really flexible and really responsive model. And again, I want to acknowledge the parents. It has been challenging as students have been identified that they need to quarantine. We know the impacts that this has on students. And I, again, just want to thank all of the community members and parents who have supported this work. We have remained open for this long because of the protocols in place and because of the cooperation that we receive around requests to keep students home when they have symptoms, honoring a full quarantine when students have been requested to self-quarantine, and again, most importantly, cooperating with the requirement that all students wear masks. Our students have been fantastic. They have complied, and those protocols are working. At this point, we intend to remain in this current condition at least through the end of this month, or for the time being, until we can begin to see the numbers in Connecticut move in a better direction. I do want to note, however, that in response to some of the things that I have been noting, we will be advertising a parent support evening to support parents with the technology concerns that are related to these distance learning. Even at the elementary schools, students are still distance learning 1 day a week. Dr. Crystal, I believe it is November 18th that we will be offering an evening activity that parents will be invited to join to talk about the challenges of technology and supporting your students at home on those distance learning days. Additionally, Dr. Crystal and Mr. Scanziano and I had a meeting today. We are looking at the possibility of being able to offer another parental support evening, educational evening, and this one looks to be exciting because it will be offered around building and maintaining a positive relationship with your children at home during these challenging times that schools are relying on home support as well. A healthcare professional who we are looking at offering that opportunity. And I will be hosting a district-wide faculty meeting. It's a meeting just for certified faculty at this time to be talking about these closings and the impact that the quarantines and such closings have been having on the buildings. It is a meeting that I'll be repeating next week for all non-certified staff members as well. Again, we're continuing to work. We're continuing to remain flexible. We're continuing to find ways to try to offer support, not only for our staff members in the system, but to the parents outside who are partnering with us through this. And I want to continue to encourage all community members to make sure that you're maintaining social distance, to make sure that you're wearing your masks, to make sure that you are following the expectations of these protocols outside of school as well as in school. Because the more that we all do that, the longer we will be able to keep schools open for our students, at least in some capacity, if not fully open. And then I thought that it made sense, Dr. Balistraci, to pause there and take questions, engage in conversation before shifting to the budget topic.
Absolutely. Anybody like to ask Dr. Freeman a question or comments or conversation? I did have one question. When the elementary and Baldwin went back to 4 days a week, did we see any significant number of families pull children back into full distance learning, or overall did we see most children who had been participating in hybrid participate in 4 days a week?
Most continued to participate in 4 days a week, and in fact, a few who had been in the distance learning module came back.
Great.
The idea that the hybrid was going to be challenging, but that 4 days a week was easier to schedule. There were a few isolated incidences where families who were comfortable with hybrid withdrew. What's important to recognize at the K through 6 level is that with the strict cohorting, right, so it allowed the students to still be in, although maintaining that stricter level of control. So no, we didn't see a statistically significant drop off at that time.
Go ahead, Moira.
Paul, I'm just curious that several weeks ago, parents in the district were sent out a survey, kind of a temperature taking of, how things were going, feedback, input in regards to the remote learning, et cetera. Is there any thought to when or how that might be shared, or,
yes, I can have that for you at your next meeting. Thank you for the reminder. I could have had that for you tonight. I
That's
apologize
okay.
for the oversight. I will have that for you and to share with the community for our next meeting.
Great, thanks.
Other questions, comments, discussion points? All right. Oh, go ahead. Go ahead, Kristen.
Okay, Dr. Freeman, just a quick question for you. I've noticed in some of the correspondences from Cox and from Baldwin that we've received some bullet points about COVID symptoms and what to do to keep ourselves safe. But also, I believe there were some bullet points in there, or maybe some links to some articles about how to talk to our kids about COVID-19. Can you just maybe iterate for the community where we can find that information? I know that, just in my own home, I don't necessarily think that I've done a great job expressing the right way to talk to the kids about it. So I think if there was a nice place that we could all go and kind of read a little bit about the best ways to age appropriately speak with our kids so that they're not terrified or they're not underwhelmed, I think that might be really helpful information for all of us in the community.
I appreciate the question. So we do try anytime we send out a communication around a quarantine notification. I know principals are doing it in their weekly updates. We try to highlight some of that. Cross-referenced on the website, you should be able to find, parents should be able to find information of that nature, one, under the COVID resources. So there is a page on our website that bundles COVID resources together. And as you look there, you will be able to find ways to speak with your children about this. And then there's an entire section on the website entitled How to Talk to Your Children About. And there are a number of different items in there. And so that's a section where you can go, and then you will find how to talk to your children about COVID-19 in that section as well. We do link to a number of resources, and there are a number of really good resources available just on the website. But the ones that we have curated together can be found on our website, cross-referenced in those two other areas. I would additionally want to point out for any parents who are concerned about that to please reach out directly to your school. Our school administrators and nurses and counselors at all levels, as well, school psychologists, school social workers, counselors, are available and ready to help you. And the school counselors, social workers, psychologists aren't there just for the students. As a parent, I would encourage you, if you're struggling or worried about how you're talking at home with your children about this topic, to reach out to your school directly and have a conversation with those adults in the school who can sort of walk through some suggestions with you, listen to your concerns, and then point you to those resources specifically that I just identified. And then additionally, Mrs. Peck, the parent resource that we were talking about, that I just mentioned earlier, that Dr. Crystal and Mr. Scanziano and I were looking at today, will be sort of targeted exactly in that direction as well. Conversations about just sort of parental self-care and how to talk to your children and how to maintain a positive relationship with your children at home with these additional stresses that are occurring in all of our homes. Thank you for the question.
Anyone else? All right. Update on the budget.
The budget update remains not dramatically changed from when we met 2 weeks ago. We did note for you at that time that budget build this year is, one, running a little bit late because of the way that schools opened this year, and two, is unsettled. And so as we heard in the budget update earlier from Mrs. Peck, there's still a lot up in the air this year around how to build the budget in response to the realities of COVID-19. We are, however, beginning the work. The board is aware that we've had one public hearing where we've heard from community members. At our last meeting, we invited members of the leadership team to come in and speak with the board. Mr. Bowden and Mrs. Trudeau and I have meetings scheduled into next week with all of the principals and department heads to bring in the local budgets. And then we continue to work on the larger components of the budget build. You heard Mr. Gurnham mention in your earlier meeting that he will be compiling information around possible bond issues that we will bring forward through the budget build as well. So while we are a little bit late in starting this year, and I don't have quite as much information at this time as I would for you, we do plan on meeting our timeline and having the budget prepared for you to receive in public and to approve on the publicized calendar that we issued a few meetings back, and that is available on our website. We intend to meet all of our timelines this year and allow you the opportunity that you need to deliberate and talk about a budget that will be a little less specific than we are used to, and leaving us some room to maneuver through what's going to be a year of continued unknowns.
All right, thank you. Any,
I apologize for the brevity of that.
no. Questions, comments, thoughts? Anybody?
That may be the shortest
All right.
report that I've offered you in the past 8 months.
Well, obviously over the next couple of months, we will be talking much more in depth and in detail about the budget. Okay, so now we are up to the board agenda. The first item, 9.1, is to act on personnel items. We have been asked to please ratify the resignation of the following teacher, Nitsa Haddad, elementary Spanish at LEAT. Is there a motion to ratify that resignation?
So moved.
Dr. Hirsch, Mrs. Sullivan, second. Everyone does it at once. All right, all in favor? Aye. Okay. And then we've been asked to please ratify the appointment of the following teachers. Michelle Lawrence, Cox Elementary School, elementary Spanish. Is there a motion to approve? Mr. Del Ventura, Mrs. Rader, second. All in favor? Aye. All right. Terrific. Next, we have 5 textbook recommendations. I believe we have 5. These came to us last month as receive items. They have been at Lathrop House for board members and the community to consult if they are interested. This is a process we do every time there's a textbook recommendation. And so now with those opportunities over the last month, we are being asked to act on each of these recommendations. So I'm going to go through them one at a time. I will pause each time to allow people, if anyone has questions or comments. So the first is a recommendation for access to history for the IB diploma, rights, and protest. This will be for the IB history 11th and 12th grade. Is there a motion to accept this textbook recommendation? Mr. Del Ventura, a second? Mrs. Sullivan, any comments or questions? No, all in favor? Aye. Okay, I see everyone, terrific. The next is a textbook called Access to History for the IB Diploma, the Second World War, and the Americas. Is there a motion to approve? Dr. Hirsch, second. Mr. Sands. This, I believe, is also for IB history, both 11th and 12th grade. Any questions or comments? No. All in favor? Aye. Terrific. All in favor. Okay. The third is a textbook recommendation, Access to History for the IB Diploma, the Cold Wars and the Americas 1945 to 1981. Is there a motion to approve? Mr. Sands, Mrs. Rader, second. Any questions? This is for IB history 11th grade, I believe, if I'm keeping up correctly. Yes. All right, all in favor? Aye. Terrific. The fourth textbook, Evolution and Development of Democratic States, 1848 to 2000. This will be used for IB history 12th grade. Is there a motion to approve? Dr. Best, Dr. Hirsch, second. Any comments or questions? All in favor? Aye. Great. And the last, Independence Movements, 1800 to 2000. This will be used for IB history 12th grade. Is there a motion to approve? Mr. Sands, second. Mrs. Sullivan, all in favor? Aye. Wonderful.
Thank you for all those approvals.
Terrific. Okay, 9.7 is to act on all hazard school security and safety plans. This is something that is done every year. Mr. Gurnham gave us a brief update in the Operations Committee to say that mostly updates to these plans were in fact in presentation and formatting to align with state requests. But this is something that we are asked to act on every year. So I am going to ask for a motion to approve the all hazard school security and safety plans. Mrs. Sullivan, thank you. Dr. Hurst, second. Any questions or comments? All right, all in favor? Aye. Okay, that is everyone. Thank you. 9.8, to act on recommendations from the policy committee. So I'm going to ask someone from the policy committee to just walk us through these next two items, please.
Katie, and working along with Mr. Bowden, we are bringing forward two different policies tonight. The first one is policy number 3315. It's a purchasing and procurement policy, and this aligns with federal guidelines that we received in the federal funds that we received in the district and how we are to utilize and allot those. So it's a very lengthy policy. I know that we all received a copy. So also just wanted to give Jason a chance if he wanted to add anything to that, or Linda, but otherwise, if there are any board members that have any questions or comments about the policy before we move it forward. I guess not.
No questions, anybody? All right, I guess not. Is that a motion to approve the policy 3315 purchasing procurement? Dr. Hirsch, Mr. Galino, second. All in favor? Aye. All right, everybody. Okay, and Mrs. Rader, I think there's a second policy for our consideration.
So the second policy we have before you is policy number 3800, operations of schools during COVID-19 pandemic. And this policy currently specifically speaks to the use of masks and wet mask wearing in the school district during this COVID-19 pandemic. And again, we have the formal language here for everyone to read through. And I really would just like to clarify that, this is in coordination and guidance from the CDC, and understandably that, we are all adhering to this in the school district, and that we just really felt it important at this time to put in place a standing policy so that there's clarification, because it also explains, besides the typical personal protection of masks, it also goes on to elaborate in terms of medical exemptions and special education and Section 504 students. So at this point, if there's any questions that anybody would like clarification on, or any input.
Any questions? I do want to just note, and it's not just this policy, but all of them. And I will say that the public may need to wait a few days until they get posted, but all of our Board of Ed policies are on the Guilford Public Schools website for anybody in our community to look at any time. Again, once a policy is approved by the board, it takes a little time to get uploaded. But just so that the public knows that at any time, if they're interested in understanding any of the policies that really guide our work and guide the school system, all of that information is available online, as will this, once it is approved and uploaded.
Absolutely. And just to also clarify, there's nothing here that hasn't already been communicated to the district and to parents and students and staff. It's just making it part of our policy.
It's a terrific idea, I think. Thank you. Any questions for Mrs. Rader or anyone on the policy committee about this? All right, so is there a motion to approve new policy 3800, operations of schools during COVID-19 pandemic? Mr. Del Ventura, Dr. Best a second. All in favor? Aye, wonderful. That's everybody. All right. So we've come to the part of the agenda where we have some receive items. The first is to receive the 2021-2022 school calendar drafts, plural. And so Dr. Freeman, I'm going to turn it over to you to walk us through what we have in front of us here.
Thank you very much, Dr. Balistraci. The anticipation is that we will present these to the board tonight and to the community tonight with the hope and the expectation that we will be able to approve these at your next public meeting. So much like policy and textbooks, that the community has intervening weeks to think about and discuss what we present here tonight. The drafts that we provide to you have once again been built on the template regional calendar. We work very closely with surrounding districts down the shoreline to try to align things like the beginning of school and April vacation and the winter break, so that for families that straddle more than one community with parents who may work in school system and students who attend another, that we have calendars that align. Additionally, when we have cooperative agreements like we do with a number of other districts around things like transportation, a common calendar becomes an efficiency. The two calendars that we have presented follow that regional template, look very traditional. These are built on the assumption of a regular school year. You will notice that we are not front loading 7 full days of professional development at the beginning of this calendar. We're not pushing the start of school deep into September the way that we did this year. These are built at this time under an assumption that even if we maintain a blended learning model that allows flexibility across fully open, hybridized, or distance learning models, that we will be able to maintain a more regular calendar. That said, the big difference between draft 1 and draft 2, and it's the only unusual part of the way the calendar falls this year, is around the first day of school. And I believe that Dr. Balistraci, you referenced the communication that made this observation as well. Traditionally, or at least recently, if not traditionally, that regional calendar has had the first day of school scheduled on the last Thursday in August. If we were to do that this year, we would have students returning on August 2nd and 3rd. And that week generally becomes 3 days of adult learning on Monday, Tuesday.
It's September 2nd.
September.
I apologize. September 2nd and 3rd. To push back that full extra week would have been too much. But even that start then has us coming in for 2 days before students then leave for the extended weekend that includes Labor Day and Rosh Hashanah. The second calendar that we've provided for you shows a first day of school scheduled for September 8th, an opening after the Labor Day and Rosh Hashanah long weekend. We would have staff members in for 3 days and then have students begin after that long Labor Day weekend. That would have an impact on the last day of school that would only push us from June 14th to June 16th for the last day of school. Our administrative team made the same observation. And quite honestly, I think there's a lot of logic in looking at that after Labor Day opening again this year. Labor Day does fall early in September again. We presented them to you this way tonight so that the community again has some intervening weeks and board members have the opportunity to receive feedback from community members before deciding on how to move forward. Much of the rest of the calendar, as I said, remains the same with 5 professional development days, 3 front-loaded, 1 on election day, and then 1 pushed later into March. It continues to have a number of early release days for professional learning that are spread across Wednesdays across the calendar. Again, it becomes very much a traditional calendar from that point forward.
Does anybody have any questions? Go ahead, Mrs. Peck. Questions right away? Yeah, go ahead.
Dr. Freeman, what are your thoughts now that we're so good at virtual learning about snow days?
Oh,
Yeah.
thank you for reminding me that. That was the other item I wanted to mention. So the Connecticut Board of Education for this year has approved the ability to maintain distance days on days that might otherwise be weather closings. So we know that for this year, that if we have days of inclement weather that would otherwise lead to a school closing, that we have the opportunity to maintain that as a distance learning day. There are some complications around that. We would want to make sure that teachers are prepared, and we'd want to at least try to anticipate whether or not there were going to be significant power outages in the community. So we maintain the ability to have a full snow day if we are anticipating an extreme event, or just as happens in the past, we might announce that we intend to have a distance learning day the evening before, find out overnight that we have significant power outages across the community, and then change to a fully closed day if we recognize that a significant portion of our students would be unable to participate even in that distance experience. As applies to this calendar, the State Board of Education has approved that only for this year only, along with the other COVID accommodations that have been made around distance learning. So while I anticipate that will continue to be discussed, it's not overtly built into this calendar. I do believe that is an idea whose time has come. I think that it'll come up again. I think that we will continue discussing it, but at this time, it's not something that we can officially assume as part of next year's calendar. It is something that we should assume as part of this coming winter, and Mrs. Hahn and I are preparing a communication to go out to families to try to explain all of this. I wanted to say before our first snow, but before we get any more snow. We've already had a few light snow events this winter.
Thank you.
Go ahead, Mrs. Sullivan.
Just something interesting that I'll just leave out there. I thought I felt pretty strongly about the snow days and adding distance learning, and I probably felt stronger about it in other years. But I did read a couple of interesting things about distance learning and snow days, and that, well, of course, snow days are frustrating for parents and families. They are a fun thing as long as they're not excessive for kids. And in a year that we've taken so much away from kids, to take away jumping in, a foot of snow outside, if it's once in a while, may not be worth that. So I'll just leave that there.
Well, there's been a lot of
sentiments as well.
There's been a lot of conversation among superintendents in all of the surrounding communities about whether or not folks intend to take advantage of those snow day opportunities or not. So yes, it is something that is in the back of our thinking as well.
Yeah, I have to say, likewise, the CABE Board of Ed Chair listserv has had some communication about that, and a few districts have said, you know what, we're preserving the fun of the snow day. Whereas others have said, we're going to take the opportunity to really use it as a remote and not lose a day. So differing approaches for sure.
For what it's worth, I think about like every important topic in 2020, it is going to be one that creates a divergence of opinion. I think that we're going to have a community that is split on whether or not we should take advantage of the distance learning and not add another day to this school year in June, and other folks who say we just got 16 inches of snow, let's throw our hands up and put on our boots and go out and have a wonderful time in it.
Other calendar questions at this point? And this will be something that will be available on the Guilford Schools website for parents to look at.
Yes, we can find a way.
Yeah.
Yep, we can for sure
Okay.
it's available. Obviously, it becomes a public document after it has
Right.
been shared with you this evening, but we can post it as a news item, ask and let the community be aware that it is received by you tonight to be acted on by you in 2 weeks, and that if there are opinions on this topic, to share them in the same way that we've called for all public comment.
Yeah, and I wasn't necessarily asking for a special posting of it, but because it was left out of our original packet, I just want to make sure it appears in the meeting packet that people get to see. Terrific. All right, next item is to receive the 2020 Board of Ed meeting calendar draft.
It
This
just tracks to the school calendar. Yep.
Right, so this just tracks the school calendar. It obviously provides both the regular meeting dates and our workshop meeting dates. You'll note most of them are on Mondays, as is every year, but we have the occasional Tuesday meeting when there is a Monday holiday, or to accommodate our budget meetings at the end of January. And that is something we will vote on next month. And then lastly, the committee meeting schedule, which provides Operation Committee, Policy Committee, and Curriculum Instruction and Assessment Committee dates for the meetings. I imagine that we could consider at some point, depending on how 2021 rolls out, some movement among schools. We traditionally try to hold meetings throughout the district. I think it's a nice way for us to be in different buildings and get to see different administrators. I think it also makes members of each school community more apt to maybe come out. At the moment, they are all scheduled for the Guilford High School Library, simply given the pandemic. But certainly we could reconsider if there's an opportunity to safely do so.
Yep, we could change that wholesale at any point that the board decides, or with enough notice, we can change the posting for location whenever that opportunity comes back to us. I agree with you. It's a positive, and we will keep an eye on putting that back into the model.
Great. Any questions about any of those? All right. So we are now on to reports of committees. Is there anything additional that the policy committee wants to share with us tonight?
Just to note, and again, Mr. Bowden can contribute to this if he'd like to. We had brought forth to the board for a receive two policies related to updates to Title IX. And so there was some review with council, and because of that, we're taking a little bit more time in bringing that forward to you, because there's going to be some revisions that will need to be made that kind of were recommended us after our last presentation of those policies. So expect that we will be bringing those back before you in the near future.
Wonderful, thank you. Anything additional from the operations committee? I don't think so. We just met this evening. The Curriculum Instruction and Assessment Committee, anything to report tonight?
Yeah, we had a great meeting on October 26th. Very informative. We had Mr. Russo and Mr. Bushnell come and present about the current social studies curriculum that's been in place for a few years now. We learned that the district has conducted a focus group, and in the future we'll be having a coach come in partially to address some of the issues that the community has raised around concerns about how the district teaches around racial issues. And we will be continuing our discussion in January, focusing a little bit more on culturally responsive teaching methods. So we're looking forward to that.
Wonderful, thank you. Dr. Freeman, were you wanting to say something?
Yeah, I was just going to follow up on what you had said earlier on the same topic. I was going to extend my thanks to Mr. Russo and Mr. Bushnell, as well as Dr. Crystal, and encourage any community member who has an interest in this topic. One of the few benefits that has come out of these last several months and needing to meet on Zoom is that it has given us the ability to archive such meetings on our website. And so for any community member who has an interest in social studies curriculum or the evolution of that curriculum, I would encourage them to watch that meeting. It's archived, it's available, and Dr. Crystal and our two teachers did a wonderful job talking about the social studies curriculum.
Agree, thank you. Liaisons to town committees, is there anybody who has something to report? No, okay. Liaison to the Learn Board of Directors. I don't know if there was a meeting recently of that group. No, okay. All right. So once again, an opportunity for me to remind the public that if they have questions, concerns, comments, please feel free to reach out to any of us. Dr. Freeman, myself, any of the board members, all of our email addresses are on the Guilford Public Schools website. And given that, I think we've come to the end of our meeting, and I will entertain a motion to adjourn. Mr. Galino, Dr. Best, a second. All in favor? Aye. All right. Thank you to the public who've joined us tonight. Thank you to my colleagues. I hope everyone has a good rest of your week. Good night.
Thanks, everyone.